Love. Mia Love gave me no love. And Barbara Comstock was another one. Peter Roskam didn't want the embrace. Eric Paulson didn't want the embrace.
Why didn't they want the embrace? Mia Love didn't give me love. I'm sorry, but I was screaming. It was so funny. All right. So most of those who bucked the president on immigration, they crashed and burned. Still others like Paul Ryan, Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, as we said, they retired. And of course, there were some exceptions. We got to be fair. Chris Kobach was basically attached at the hip with Trump on immigration, but he lost in Kansas's gubernatorial contest. Sadly, he just wasn't a great campaigner. But on the whole, Trump's strong immigration policies proved a deciding factor in both the Senate and gubernatorial victories in Florida, Texas, and in Georgia. Now, in Florida, for example, voters rated immigration the second most important issue. Just a few points behind health care. Check it out. 3 points. Now, these midterms also showed that neither political nor Hollywood star power paid off in Georgia or in Florida. And what the Democrats did achieve in these midterms was a, below average pickup of seats in the House against the party in power. The amazing thing is, all this happening, the Democrats still really haven't learned anything. Since Donald Trump descended that big brass escalator in the tower, they've been trying to cast him as a racist, a homophobe, xenophobe, a biased. He's kind of like an Archie Bunker in a long red tie. Actually, Archie Bunker, a lot of people liked Archie, but you can't put up with someone like Archie Bunker today. My friends, the Democrats are bereft of real ideas. So rather than offering some, they propose socialist-style freebies in healthcare, college, universal pre-K. And the Democrats, once again, by the way, went all in for identity politics in the midterms. They tried to argue that Brian Kemp in Georgia was trying to stop black people from voting. It's ridiculous. They tried to argue that Ron DeSantis in Florida was some kind of closet racist for questioning Gillum's ethics. And it went on and on and on. And even after they got shellacked in 2016 and lost the Senate last night, they're still dealing the race card.
He used every race dog whistle, every bigotry that he had.
Making overtly bigoted, racist statements, attacking brown people, attacking black people.
I want us to watch it because he's going to replace the caravan with a New York Jew, Jerry Nadler, a West Coast intellectual Jew, Adam Schiff, a black man, Elijah Cummings, and a woman, Nancy Pelosi.
The president has enough support in enough places to win big races in states that have large enough rural populations to either offset suburban America or whatever.
It's those racist rural people. So how dare those country bumpkins ruin the country for the urbanite elites? Now, when the country rejects the left's racialization of politics, well, basically the Democrats just write them off altogether. I have a simple question, though, to ask. How do you build a political movement by hating on basically half of the American people? Rather than grapple with why this tactic fell flat last night, the media continued the race to the bottom during today's White House news conference.
On the campaign trail, you called yourself a nationalist. Some people saw that as emboldening white nationalists. Now people are also saying that the president.
It's such a racist.
There are some people that say that now the Republican Party is seen as supporting white nationalists because of your rhetoric. What do you make of?
Why do I have my highest poll numbers ever with African Americans? Why do I have among the highest poll numbers with African Americans? I mean, why do I have my highest poll numbers? That's such a racist question.
Have you ever made racist remarks?
No, I would never do that, and I don't use racist remarks.
Well, one point of fact. One point of fact, because you told her you have the highest approval among African Americans. It's just 8%, sir, single digits.
See, when you talk about division, it's people like this that cause division. Great division. Great. No, point of fact is that I never used a racist remark. That's the point of fact.
The press was just absolutely reprehensible today. I have never seen anything like that. And the president is right. Rasmussen's tracking poll from October 29th has the president at a 40% approval among black respondents. So they can throw out their single digits all they want. Let's just take a sample, 40 to 8. Let's say it's 25. Now, it's good that the president smashed back against these obvious attempts to recast his victory and demonize his supporters. Here are the facts. The Democrats have lost 2 Supreme Court seats, the Senate, and the White House. And after 2 years of protests and nonstop attacks on Trump, they emerged from the midterms with no mandate. Good going, guys. There's no doubt the president, of course, now will have his work cut out for him. He's going to have to recalibrate his approach as the new year begins under Democratic House rule. So he'd be wise to do a few things. Begin to expand his movement beyond where it already is, and he's got to adapt to the changing demographics in key states. Occasionally, he should shift to a more moderate tone while not moderating his policies. He should offer to work with Democrats on issues of common concern, which, by the way, he did today. Watch.
I put that statement out on social media today about Nancy Pelosi, and a lot of people thought I was being sarcastic or I was kidding. I wasn't. I think she deserves it. She's fought long and hard. She's a very capable person. Nancy Pelosi and I can work together and get a lot of things done.
That was a great moment. But he's getting no credit for that. Now, sometimes the president might seem to think that showing his humanity, or softer, I don't want to say softer, but his humanity is a sign of weakness. It's not. And the turning on the charm sometimes, it resonates, especially with female voters. So going forward, the president should urge, by the way, separate from all the tone and how you should come off, the president should urge Mitch McConnell to go full steam ahead with Senate confirmations of both judges and members of the executive branch. The next Supreme Court nominee should be chosen without regard to gender, skin color, none of the bean counting. It should only be based on his or her conservative bona fides. Forget the bean counting. You don't need to do it. Now, don't fret the House investigations, Mr. President. We all know that Nadler, Maxine, Schiff, etc. will all take it a step too far in their fervor for payback, and the voters won't like that at all. President Trump will have to be more creative in advancing his agenda forward. But in the meantime, he should feel really good about what he accomplished, especially since the voters may have unwittingly given the president something he has needed for so long: a clear and worthy opponent. And that's the angle.
Okay, with the Justice Department under new leadership, at least for now, the president says today he may declassify a slew of documents related to the Mueller Russia probe. Let's talk about that and a lot of news today with our power panel. Tom Dupree, the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush, Fox News contributor, and former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz, also author of The Deep State. And Harry Litman, former United States Attorney and Deputy Assistant Attorney General. You are a very qualified bunch tonight, panel. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about this. First of all, reaction from the woman who looks like has a very good shot at being the next House Speaker again, Nancy Pelosi, tonight saying this: Acting Attorney General Whitaker, we're talking about Matt Whitaker, must be recused from any involvement from the Russia investigation, and Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein should be allowed to continue to oversee the investigation unhindered. Tom, we'll start with you. Your reaction to today's events and that reaction from the potentially next Speaker.
Well, I think today's events, I got to say, Shannon, this is probably the least surprising personnel decision in the history of the Republic. We all knew this was coming. It was not a question of whether, it was a question of when. So the fact that once the midterms are in the rearview mirror, the president wanted to reset his Justice Department team, get a cabinet official and attorney general in whom he has 100% confidence, doesn't surprise me in the least. Nor, frankly, does Nancy Pelosi's comments about the incoming acting attorney general. I think that calls for him to recuse from Russia, I think, are meritless. All he has done is in the past, he has written on the topic. If that were a basis for recusal, I think, frankly, there would be very few public officials who might actually pass that test. I say we need to give Matt Whitaker a chance, let him come in, let the president put his new team in place, and I'm confident that he will follow all applicable DOJ guidelines as far as recusal goes on Russia or other issues.
Well, and Jason, I know that you thought that the Attorney General, now former Attorney General, but Jeff Sessions, was not doing an effective job for the president, although he was working on a lot of top priorities, actually getting things done within the DOJ. But that recusal, was that the sticking point for you? And did you feel like that alone meant he needed to go?
Well, look, Attorney General Sessions is a patriot. He was a good Republican, and I applaud him for his service. The problem I had with him as Attorney General is he simply didn't do his job. He lost the confidence of the president, and he lost the confidence of the United States Congress. We were asking for documents, subpoenaing documents. Remember when they promised to give us the Fast and Furious documents? The Department of Justice still has never given Congress the Fast and Furious documents. So the Department of Justice under Sessions was very similar to Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch. I couldn't tell the difference. He lost the confidence of Congress. It was unable to turn around the department. It was department in chaos based on the Attorney General's, the Inspector General's report, and it was time for a change, and Donald Trump, the president, did the right thing.
Okay, so now with Matt Whitaker as acting Attorney General, Harry, he actually does have some action that he can take with regard to Mueller, as far as, he's talked about issues of funding, cutting it back so that it really kind of puts handcuffs potentially on the investigation. By law, I mean, if there are new broadening scopes and changes to the investigation, that would have to go past Whitaker. Plus, he could call for an accounting on any investigative step that Mueller is taking with regard to this investigation. Do you think things will change under Matt Whitaker versus how Sessions handled this?
Well, obviously Sessions didn't handle it, so it's whether it will change under Whitaker as contrasted with Rosenstein, and yes would be the short answer. Everything you said is now, as we sit here, within his latitude. I think it's unlikely. I think most people think it's unlikely that he would try to fire or really, asphyxiate the investigation, but he has many actions he can take, and in particular, he can try to curb the probe. He's on record as saying that agreeing with the president that would cross a red line to go into finances. He also has oversight now. He's the acting Attorney General of the other cases in the SDNY and Eastern District of Virginia. And you can understand the nervousness of Democrats. He's clearly someone who is more skeptical and worried about Mueller's power than was Rod Rosenstein, and he is a Trump partisan. So yeah, I think people justifiably expect some possible very short of actual pulling the plug, but some pretty big changes.
Okay, and the president said today, listen, I've got the power to shut this stuff down, to declassify everything. I'm not doing that. I'm letting it play out. This is what current Congressman, soon to be retired, Trey Gowdy said on Special Report tonight about what he thinks Mueller will ultimately do.
I think Mueller is going to issue an exhaustive report on what Russia did, which should unify America, and then he's going to disappoint CNN and all my Democrat friends by saying there's no evidence of collusion. That's what I think he's going to do, and I think it'll happen before the end of the year, but I don't know that.
And of course, Matt Whitaker will have some say over what happens to that report, to that information, how it's disseminated. Quick reaction from each of you. I'll start with you, Tom.
I think that it is a very significant game change that Whitaker is now going to be in charge of the Russia investigation. I agree. It is exceedingly unlikely, I would say virtually zero, that he actually goes so far as to terminate Mueller or to effectively to end this investigation. I think he's going to let it play out. I do think Mueller, for him, the conclusion of this investigation is in the not too distant future. I don't know if I agree with Congressman Gowdy that it's by the end of the year, but I don't think it's too far beyond that.
Jason?
I think Trey Gowdy, as usual, is absolutely right. I think the Inspector General is also coming up with a report about potential FISA abuse. Nobody talks about that because they don't have any leaks there, but Michael Horowitz will come out with a report, and I do hope that the president appoints John Ratcliffe, the congressman out of Texas, the former federal prosecutor, as the next Attorney General. That would be the right move.
All right, Harry, your thoughts on the potential Mueller report coming to a conclusion?
So first, on Congressman Gowdy, rule number one, nobody knows what Bob Mueller is going to do except Bob Mueller and now Matt Whitaker. On the point of what happens to the report, really important. He will have the latitude to not issue it. It will be up to him, and as you know, Team Trump has said that they prefer that it not come out. It's hard to imagine it will never see the light of day, but he will have the authority to keep it bottled up if he wants.
All right, so tonight we have an acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, and the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who many folks have thought over the past year or so would be on his way out, remains there as well. Gentlemen, thank you all for weighing in. Good to hear from you tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
After 8 years, Democrats once again control the House of Representatives. That'll be official in January, but only by a pretty slim margin. Now a new battle begins, and that's the battle over the Democratic Party's message. What do they stand for? Is it open borders and socialism? Wages in the middle class? Who knows what it is, or will it just remain Trump is evil, Republicans are racist? Is that enough? Brian Dean Wright is a Democrat, former CIA officer. It's a sincere question. In my view, there's the identity politics wing of the party and the economic populism wing of the party. I know who I'm rooting for. Who do you think is going to win? What is the message?
Who's going to win? That's the big question. What we saw yesterday was a divide between the Heartland Democrats and the Coastal Democrats. So the Heartland Democrats, a lot of those folks from Michigan and Pennsylvania, even places like Kansas and Oklahoma,
yes,
who are saying, let's focus on the basics, right? Good wages, decent jobs, affordable health care. That's the message that I think most Americans want to hear. What we are hearing, however, from the coastal folks is something very, very different. This is the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez democratic socialism, which is lots of big government, lots of programs that we can't really pay for. We want to abolish ICE. We want to not really address the immigration issue because we want open borders. That is the other wing of the party. Which one will win? Here's my concern of why the Alexandria Cortez folks will win. We've got DNC chair Tom Perez, who says that she is the head of the Democratic Party. She's the future of the Democratic Party. We also have Obama, who actually endorsed her as well.
Wait, can I say, is that because she's impressive, or is it because of the way she... Right, I'm not being mean, but, but she's young, and she seems like she doesn't know very much at all, and so I'm beginning to think it's only because of her race and gender, which is not a good way to make these decisions on, because it's irrelevant.
Of course, but this gets back to, I think, with the philosophical, the ideological struggle that's happening within the party right now, and that is this. Are we going to be a party that tells people you have to vote for Democrats because you're a woman, because you're gay, because the color of your skin is dark? That is one wing of the party. In fact, you hear it from people now in Texas criticizing white people who didn't vote for Beto. But saying thank you to folks who are of color.
I'm just confused because here Beto O'Rourke is this white guy with a fake Hispanic name running against an actual Hispanic guy named Ted. But if you voted for the white guy against the Hispanic guy, you're a racist? Like, how does that even... I'm too literal for this world, I think.
Yeah, well, you and me both. And I can tell you, as a Democrat, it's incredibly frustrating to watch the party cannibalize itself in the midst of this debate. Because at the end of the day, if you look at this from a health of the democracy, we need multiple parties. We need good debates.
Yes, I totally
Democrats
agree.
can't be a part of that conversation when we are all so far off in the left field that we're talking about open borders and people have to vote a certain way because of their gender. So that is really the cost, the consequence, and frankly, why Republicans should be upset about this as well. We all should be concerned when a major party in this country is so unhinged that they're not giving the people a choice.
I think that's a really wise point, and for that reason, I am rooting for the Democrats to get sane. I don't think it doesn't help anybody if one party falls apart. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Great to see you. Well, there are always aftershocks immediately after campaigns. The first one of the 2018 midterms arrived pretty quickly this afternoon. The president fired his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. For more than a year, the president has publicly criticized and ridiculed Sessions, so it was not very surprising. Now the president has assured the ability of replacing Sessions with a new appointment since Republicans held the Senate. Clearly, he saw no reason to keep him around. Now, in theory, going forward, Jeff Sessions could challenge Doug Jones in 2020 to reclaim the Alabama Senate seat that he gave up to serve the president as AG. If he did that, he'd almost certainly win. He's one of the most popular people in the state. We asked a source close to Sessions, and he said that's probably not going to happen, and Sessions will probably just retire into private life. And if he does that, of course, we will wish him the best, but it will be, and we should say this, a loss for the country. Donald Trump's long-shot presidential campaign succeeded because he promised what so many voters wanted, and yet what so few politicians were willing to campaign on because they are cowards. Among his many promises, the most important was his pledge to reverse decades of deliberate neglect. And and treat our national borders like they're real, like our country matters. Nobody understood that message better than Jeff Sessions. He understood it immediately. He was one of the president's first and most unwavering supporters, I think the first in the Senate, and it was because of immigration. When the president took office, he gave up an essentially lifetime post representing Alabama to help fulfill Trump's mission. Sadly, the country was going another way. Within about 5 minutes of the 2016 election, Democrats decided their defeat was not about immigration or an abandoned middle class. It was instead, you'll remember, about Russia and the conspiracy between Vladimir Putin and Trump. Now, Republicans said they didn't believe that story. And yet, for some reason, many of them allowed Democrats to reframe the entire political debate in the country and make Russia the single biggest issue in American politics. But Jeff Sessions did not fall for that. He never let himself get distracted from the mission at hand. While everyone else obsessed over dossiers and FISA warrants, Sessions worried about the mission he was hired to do. He introduced a zero-tolerance approach to immigration prosecution. He treated illegal entry into the United States as a crime because it is a crime. His DOJ issued new opinions to restrict the exploitation of asylum laws in this country. He fought to strip federal funding of sanctuary cities. Courts ruled against him, but he did everything he could to get those things done. His department accelerated the hiring of immigration judges. Didn't get a lot of attention, but it's a big deal. More cases can be heard and deportations can take place more quickly. That's a service to America and also, by the way, to the people being held. On DACA, Sessions' refusal to defend that program, which is unconstitutional, really induced the president to end the program. Sessions wasn't just effective in immigration, though. He rolled back the Obama administration's soft-on-crime policies across the board. He pursued tougher penalties for drug dealers that earned the condemnation not just of liberals, but of wealthy libertarians who decided the war on drugs was a total disaster. This at a time when more people were dying every year of drug ODs than died during all of Vietnam. But the decadent decided, oh, it's immoral to prosecute drug dealing. Okay, the population knew differently because their relatives were dying. Of course, Sessions also ended the Obama administration's harassment of local law enforcement that had helped drive a surge in violent crime in major cities. If you live in one, you know what we're talking about. Sessions did all of this even as the president who appointed him attacked him in public. Those attacks started more than a year ago. After one of the president's public rebukes, we traveled with Sessions just by chance to El Salvador, where he was pushing a fight against MS-13. Sessions made it clear he was in the cabinet to get results and would serve as long as the president would have him.
He has said again and again in many different forums throughout this barrage that you should have acted differently. You should have not accused yourself from oversight of the Russia investigation. Do you agree with that?
Well, you know, I understand his feelings about it because this has been a big distraction for him. But Tucker, I talked to experts in the Department of Justice, people who are trained in that. I'm confident I made the right decision.
You said the criticism was hurtful, and the president has made it really clear that he doesn't seem to want you to run the Department of Justice. Will you continue to run it?
Well, he can make that clear at any time. I serve at the pleasure of the president. Yes. If he wants to make a change, he can certainly do so, and I would be glad to yield in that circumstance, no doubt about it.
Sessions wasn't perfect, obviously. He never seemed like an especially good administrator of a large agency. He sometimes got rolled by his staff. The Russia investigations have shown that FBI and DOJ are deeply politicized, and Sessions never seemed to fully get a handle on the permanent bureaucracy beneath them. But if you take 3 steps back, here's what you see. In an administration beset with constant leaks and infighting and people looking out for themselves, and only themselves, Sessions was maybe one of the very few people who never forgot why he was there, to make America a better country. We can only hope that his replacement will do the same.
So here's Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, or I should say now the former Attorney General, leaving the Justice Department. As you can see, there's a group of people congratulating him, giving him well wishes as he departs. This is 2 years that he's been there, come this January, and Jeff Sessions, as you can see, being applauded at the moment. This is right outside the Justice Department on Constitution. That's his the new Attorney General, Mr. Whitaker, shaking hands with him. he's about to get emotional there, and you can understand why. It's been a rough road, and that letter, as Jesse pointed out, was unsigned that he had given to the president. The president releasing the letter today, and Jeff Sessions leaving tonight. So this was all done in rapid fashion. Sessions getting into a car there right outside the Justice Department, surrounded by senior staff.
Let's go to the outgoing House Judiciary Committee member, California Republican Congressman Darrell Issa. We told you about Jerry Nadler stepping into that post, and soon. Already, they're raising the red flags. Are you?
Well, I think the challenge is that legitimate oversight is the obligation of Congress. Unfortunately, incoming Chairman Jerry Nadler has a long-standing grudge with the president. He's made it clear that impeachment is a goal, and that makes his investigations very suspect. There's no question at all. And I have, as a longtime investigator on oversight and judiciary, Congress has a role, and this administration has and needs to even more provide cooperation with legitimate inquiries for the interest of Congress in its oversight role. And, I'm hopeful that the administration will continue doing it. Certainly the million documents and White House counsel being produced in the Mueller investigation is a good example of cooperation. But I was there when President Bush lost his majority and Henry Waxman came in. Right. Some of what he did was very legitimate. Some was not.
Now they're making a big issue or fear that the president is going to try to do something to Mueller, either discredit or even lead or push for his firing. That would not appear to be the case, but obviously that's a fair, and they want to guarantee that he can't do that. What do you think of that?
Well, I know I've seen some of the legislation. The reality is that if Mueller cannot come up with a single indictable event that went on in this administration during the campaign by any of its high-ranking people in the next few months, then his campaign, his campaign to look for it should end. 2 years is a long time to look for a crime.
I've been told, by the way, that we're going to know something. Forget a few months and a few weeks, and that the timing of this is odd, if that was the understanding.
Well, the timing right after the election is one of the few appropriate things to come out of this Justice Department. They did indictments in the last minute of 2 members of Congress. So doing it right after the election would be appropriate. If they actually have somebody who did something wrong working for the committee for the president, great, bring it forward. But up until now, every single one of these indictments and accusations has been completely outside his mandate. And that's one of the areas that is frustrating. Do we want to protect Mueller if he has that and he's going after it? Of course. At the same time, you don't have a special prosecutor so they can go look for a crime. I don't know yours or anyone else's private lives, but very few people have never done anything wrong, including, jaywalked. So if you put somebody on someone long enough and you tell them just to go look for something, eventually they'll find something on somebody. So,
well, the president's always called this a witch hunt. I don't know what the final report will be, but is it, in your eyes, that?
It is a false narrative created by Hillary Clinton and the DNC that led to an investigation that is now looking for a crime alleged in that false dossier. So just because it was a false dossier doesn't mean something didn't happen. But at the same time, the case, the legitimacy of this investigation and special counsel was created by what we now know are discredited documents. So it is time to wrap it up or come up with something that shows that it was never just Hillary Clinton and the DNC producing a fake dossier.
Now there are new sheriffs in town, right? I mean, I know you stepped down, your district just flipped and went to a Democrat, but I'm wondering, what is it going to be like the next couple of years with Democrats in charge of these key committees, in charge of the House? Close as the final figures were, it's a Democratic House.
I was a ranking member in the last time we were in this position. And so, I know what it's like to be a chairman, of course, but I also know what it's like to be a ranking member and try to hold the chairman to do what they should do. There's plenty. We have 74 inspector generals that are just teeming with things that go wrong in any administration.
Do you think we're going to see a lot of investigations? We're going to see a lot of subpoenas. We're going to see the president's tax records, on and on, all this.
I would hope that the first first thing that the incoming chairman of Oversight and Judiciary would do is look for the waste, fraud, and abuse that exist in government and go after some of that. Henry Waxman famously found out that we had flown countless millions of dollars worth of $20 bills to Iraq and lost track of them. We're talking about cash that just disappeared. You know, those kinds of things are part of Congress's oversight. So there will be legitimate oversight. Ranking members, now Republicans, have to support that on a bipartisan basis. And there will be clear witch hunts. There will be attempts to simply smear the administration. And the minority has to step up to the plate and call those balls and strikes so the public understands that Republicans have to be for making sure that waste, fraud, and abuse is taken on, because it happens in every administration. At the same time, they've got to be the ones that say, we'll protect, if you will, the administration against unnecessary and very expensive intrusions into their prerogatives to work with this bureaucracy to make it work better for the American people.
Well, do you think that it's just going to be crazy for the next couple of years? I mean, ahead of a presidential election, of course, the president was saying, you know, we did better than most administrations in their first midterms, and indeed the Republicans did gain more seats in the Senate. But it's not going to be a kumbaya Washington.
It's not going to be a kumbaya Washington. It hasn't been since I saw people turn their backs and say that President George W. Bush was an appointed, not elected president. This isn't a new problem. But as somebody like you that looks at business more often than I look at politics, the market made a statement today. The market made a statement.
I agree with that.
The statement that was strong. That
if they were panicked about a constitutional crisis, they wouldn't have done what they did.
And often people talk about constitutional crisis when in fact it's simply that something they don't like. I believe the market.
Well, the market is telling you that they don't think this will develop into one, but markets oftentimes can be wrong. You think the markets, their gut read on this today was right?
I think their gut read that you can create investigations in the House, some of which will be appropriate and to be honest, beneficial. And the Senate will be that cooling saucer that was described historically that is not going to let unreasonable things from the House spill over into legislation. And that's going to be a big part of it, is that you can pass anything out of the House by simply ordering your party to vote that way. But senators aren't of either party willing to take what comes from the House and just rubber stamp it. So I think the split Congress is one where the markets are quite happy. I think they're also happy that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have some huge majority where she can run roughshod. In fact, there are people like Colin Peterson and other moderate Democrats who, quite frankly, are not thrilled to walk a plank for Nancy Pelosi.
Real quickly, we're told, Chairman, that Rod Rosenstein has left the White House. We don't know what happened there. But this was apparently a prearranged meeting. If he wasn't fired or asked to resign, what do you think it was about?
Well, you know, I would hope that he understands that he has a new boss, subject to confirmation.
Wouldn't he be offended that he wasn't he is the acting, the deputy?
He's a deputy.
So you'd think he would move up to that.
Well, clearly there's a conflict. He's been overseeing the Mueller investigation. If he continues to have the day-to-day responsibility for that, quite frankly,
Chuck Schumer says Whitaker has the conflict.
Well, Whitaker probably has no conflict. To be honest, now that we know what we know about the investigations, the reality is Attorney General Sessions really didn't have a conflict, but he erred on the side of, if you will, being very ethical. I think the important thing is that if the president said, you're going to continue to do this job, but you've got a new boss who isn't conflicted, who can look over your shoulder to make sure that what you're doing is right, then probably he should walk away saying, hey, I didn't get fired. I did get an opportunity to continue doing the job, but unlike Jeff Sessions, I do have somebody who's going to take a more personal interest in making sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Chairman, very good seeing you again. Good luck in your next endeavor.
Well, I look forward to life in the private sector or wherever I'm taken.
All right, very good seeing you again, sir.
Jeff
Sessions. Never took control of the Justice Department. He took the job, and then he said, I'm going to recuse myself. You know, the only reason I gave him the job, because I felt loyalty. I was disappointed that he recused himself, and many people think I was right on that.
Can I assume he's gone?
No, you can't assume that.
He's been frustrated about my recusal and other matters, but we have been so pleased and honored to be given the responsibility to execute his agenda.
I'm very happy with most of my cabinet. We're looking at different people for different positions. I didn't want to do anything before the midterms.
But after the midterms, about an hour after the news conference, actually, the news came out that Jeff Sessions is no longer going to be Attorney General, leaving today in the resignation letter saying, quote, at your request, I am submitting my resignation. I've been honored to serve as Attorney General. I've worked to implement the law enforcement agenda based on the rule of law that formed a central part of your campaign for presidency. Thank you for the opportunity. And then leaving, he had a moment outside the Justice Department in which he shook hands with the acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, who is the Chief of Staff for Jeff Sessions, and that choice is getting a lot of attention. Let's bring in our panel. Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen, Mara Eliason, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. Okay, Mark.
So I think the President of the United States is learning from his mistakes. If he had done this with James Comey after the 2016 election, there would be no Mueller probe today. The reality is that the President of the United States, it's absolutely normal after an election for the President of the United States to reshuffle his cabinet, to ask some people to leave and other people to come. When I was in the White House in 2004, President Bush waited until after the election for Donald Rumsfeld to replace him. So this is completely which he did the day after the midterm. So this is normal process. If he had waited to do this, and then all of a sudden some development came with the Mueller probe or something controversy with the Justice Department, then people would start speculating about whether this was, we'd be into conspiracy theories about obstruction of justice. Here it's just very clear the election has changed and he's moving on. It's a smart move.
You know, a lot of people asking what has happened to the possibility of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who was at the White House today. Shouldn't he then assume the top spot? I asked Trey Gowdy about that earlier in the show.
He is alleged to have wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment and question the president's fitness for office. So I'm not sure that would have been the right pick, but he is overseeing the Mueller probe right now. I don't think anything's going to happen to Rod until after Mueller finishes his investigation, and then what happens after that will be between the president and Rod.
Mark.
That's the big question, what happens to the Mueller probe, and that's why people are all up in arms, especially Democrats, because Rod Rosenstein now oversees the Mueller probe, but if the Attorney General is not recused, whoever replaces him can take that
right. In fact, DOJ
himself.
said later in the afternoon that with Whitaker coming in, who has not obviously recused himself, he will now oversee.
He will now have that responsibility. Then the question is, what does he do? In the past, he's spoken about ways that you can kind of starve the probe, deprive it of funds so it de facto shuts down. He's talked about how there should be a red line looking into the president's finances. That would be a bridge too far. So Democrats want to protect the Mueller investigation. They don't want it shut down, and that's going to be the next big controversy.
Well, we should point out that that Bob Mueller, everything we know is that he's staying coloring within the lines. He passed off the finance stuff to the Southern District of New York, and we just don't know when he's coming forward. You mentioned Matt Whitaker talking about that. Here's a soundbite when he was commenting.
Govern the budget of the special counsel, and that is well within the purview of the Attorney General. So I can see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment, and that Attorney General doesn't fire Bob Mueller, but he just reduces his budget so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt.
So Democrats are asking, is he that acting Attorney General?
Well, and this is a really interesting thing that might be worth doing. We haven't had a lot of accountability for the special counsel. We don't even know what the actual limits of the special counsel probe are because that memo that Rosenstein revised has not been made public. The American people actually don't know much about what's going on there, and it would be great to finally have someone who actually can oversee this. I mean, Jeff Sessions is a fine and honorable man, and that honor was used against him by people who believe in this Russia conspiracy theory to get him to recuse himself. And he didn't need to do that. And he was way too naive to believe that that was even a reasonable thing to do. But just Americans believe that law enforcement agencies and police forces shouldn't be rogue, that they should have civilian accountability over them, and it's good to have someone in place who can do that.
And Gowdy also said it's possible that Whitaker is the person that's the impetus for another special counsel looking at the FBI and the early stages of the Russia probe. It seems like you're getting to the end of this, but who knows?
Yeah, it's one day after the midterms and we're already back into whittling this down into more special counsels and more controversy. I mean, this is generally the pivot where we've got to be right now, which is, are we going to, we've now got a Democratic majority in the House. There's a chance for some bipartisanship on both sides. Are we going to go down the rat hole of having all the expanding probes and more special counsels, more controversy, or are we going to try and see whether the two sides can actually work together and do what the American people said they wanted them to do, which is to unite and try and get some things done?
To that point, Jerry Nadler tweeting out, Americans must have answers immediately as to the reasoning why behind the president's removing Jeff Sessions from the Justice Department. Why is the president making this change? Who has the authority over the special counsel Mueller's investigation? We will be holding people accountable. And Molly, you think that he will be holding people accountable?
Yeah, I happened to ride the train down from New York to D.C., and Jerry Nadler, in my presence, talked with a friend about how Democrats now taking over Congress plan to do investigations leading to potential impeachment for Justice Kavanaugh, and that they're all in on the Russia investigation. And so, you might wish that Democrats would actually work on legislation instead of continuing with some of these endless probes, but the executive branch needs to be smart about this, and they need to not be as naive as they were at the beginning of the administration.
You always have to go with the quiet car. You just, as a lawmaker, I think the quiet car is the way to go.
vậy? Con điên, ba Phú là con điên.